boys and girls, and welcome to Mrs. Hoover's art class. Do you like outer space? Do you ever look up into the sky and wonder if there's some alien planets out there? Well, today we are going to make an alien planet landscape. Do you know what a landscape is? A landscape is like a picture or a painting of outside. You'll see the land, the sky, sometimes there's trees, sometimes there's the buildings, maybe even people, but generally it's an outside picture. This painting by a famous artist, Vincent van Gogh, is a very good example of a landscape. What do you notice in this painting? Do you see the sky? Do you see the swirling clouds? What about the mountains? And in the front, do you see the fields, the grasses, and the buildings? Vincent van Gogh was really good at using his brush strokes to make his painting look like it has movement. So you can see how it's kind of looks like the grasses are blowing in the wind and the clouds are flowing across the sky. He was really good at that. So we are going to create some artwork of an alien planet. So yours could look something like this. This is what I'm going to show you how to make, or you can make yours very different if you'd like to. Here's what you will need for this project. Let's look at some samples of what some other students have done in the past. Let's get started painting. I have my watercolors, I have my brush, I've got the white paper and a cup of water. We're going to do the backgrounds to make the planet and the landscape. This is the paper we're going to paint, and then we're going to go back and cut out our landscape and our planet. So we're going to do what's called a watercolor wash technique. And a watercolor wash, do you know what that is? A watercolor wash, or any kind of a wash, is when you use a lot of water with the paints. So our paints will bleed together and blend together. Now, one of the things we need to know is how the colors will look when they blend together. So we need to kind of think about our color wheel. Do you remember the three primary colors? The three primary colors are blue, yellow, and red. So that's what we call primary. So do you know what color I would get if I mixed together blue and yellow? I would get green. What if I mix together red and blue? That's right, purple. And red and yellow give me orange. That's my secondary colors. So what I need to know is, what will these colors look like when they blend together, when they mix together? Which ones will look good and which ones won't look good? Well, have you ever been painting and have you ever just mixed all of the paints together? What did you get when you mixed all the paints together? You got kind of a muddy color, didn't you? Kind of a gray color. Yes. So that's fine if you wanted a gray color. But if you want to have your colors not be all muddy, then you need to figure out what colors blend together well. So if you mix all the colors together, you're going to get a muddy color. But if you mix yellow and orange together, you're just going to get kind of a yellow-orange. Or if you mix yellow and red together, we already talked about that, you'll get an orange. So colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, they blend together and they won't get muddy. So yellow on this side, if you mix the ones that are next to each other, they will not get muddy. But if you get closer down here and you start mixing things that are on the opposite from each other, those colors will start to get muddy. And the reason is because purple is really what two colors? What two colors do you mix together to get purple? Red and blue. So if you mix yellow with purple, it's the same as mixing yellow with red and blue, and there you're mixing all the colors together and you're going to have the mud color again. So colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, those, if you mix those together, you'll get kind of a brownish mud. So if you want your colors to not get muddy, then stick with colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Now before I start painting, I need to prepare my watercolors. To do that, I'm going to put a little bit of water in each little pan of paint. This helps the paint to soften up. Okay, I've got my watercolor paper and I'm just going to start using my watercolor wash technique and adding colors quickly with lots of water. And I'm just going to randomly paint things together. You can see how it kind of bleeds, and I love that. When we get all our colors on, we're going to use some plastic wrap, and I'll show you what we'll do for that. I just love a watercolor wash. It's so much fun. You can see it's still very wet. I can kind of let it drip around a little bit, but I'm going to add some texture. To do that, I'm going to use a piece of plastic from just a box of plastic wrap, and I'm tearing off a piece about the size of my paper, and I'm going to lay it down. It doesn't have to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to start moving it around. I'm adding texture. Texture is how something feels. It could be rough or smooth or bumpy or fluffy or slick, or even lumpy. When you touch a three-dimensional sculpture, you can feel if it's rough or if it's smooth. You can tell if it's a rough stone or if it's really polished smooth. Well, in a painting, we can make it look rough or look smooth by the way we paint it. Now, I could add a fluffy fur to my art for texture, or I can paint something that looks like fluffy fur. Both of these are texture. So texture is how something feels or how it looks like it feels. So I've kind of squished it up a little bit, and then I'm just going to peel it back. All right. That adds some good texture. I can also take my paintbrush and I can draw with the end of my paintbrush, adding lines. Because I want lots of texture in my planets, so adding lines like this would be okay. Now I can take my plastic and I can go back over this area here and I can print it with it. So I'm actually adding texture like that. I don't want to do a whole lot. You can see how it's kind of getting muddy. So I think I'm good. I'm going to let this dry. Now we are ready to make our starry sky, and to do that we are going to splatter paint. I just have a plate, I have a toothbrush, and I have some tempera paint. So I'm going to pour some onto my plate. I don't need very much paint. I'm just going to use about the size of a quarter. I tell my kids usually to get about the size of a quarter. Okay, so we're going to use the paintbrush to splatter paint. The way we're going to do it is we're going to flick on the brush. We're going to flick from front to back, and you want to be a little careful with splatter paint. It has a tendency to go everywhere. You can practice if you want to on a piece of paper. My ground is going to be down here, so I don't have to worry about that part as much. And like I say, if I have blobs, I can put a planet over it, or I can make it into an exploding star, and I'll show you how to do that later. Okay, I think I like that galaxy full of stars. Okay, so now my picture is dry. I waited until the next day, and I'm ready to cut out my alien planets. So the things you'll need is a pencil, some scissors, an oil pastel that's black, and various lids. I've gathered these up from around the house, some different things. I got this tape, and I even got a can of pineapple juice because I like the size of that for a planet. You can just use whatever you can find. And so we're going to trace around these templates, use these as templates to make some circles. So I'm just going to place it at random places and draw around with my pencil. paper here, set it aside. I like looking at my planets. And I don't have to decide yet what I'm going to use, but they look so awesome and fun. I probably won't use this many, but I like to be able to choose depending on what my colors are. Okay, so now we're going to set these aside. We're going to make our land down here at the bottom. We're going to use this paper that we cut up to be our landforms because you can see there's some odd shapes. So I'm just going to cut some different shapes out, and then I'm going to be gluing them on the bottom here. So I'm just going to randomly see what I've got. That's a pretty cool shape. And I'm going to layer these and add these on the bottom. You can use these or not if you want to make your own or mix them up. And it's sticking off here on the side. That's okay, I can trim it. So I'm going to lay some different pieces down. And it starts to look like a crazy alien landscape. One thing I would make sure to do is not let any of the sky show through here because that is the ground, so you wouldn't see any sky. So make sure I cover up all of the black at the bottom. Okay, I kind of like that. There's some pieces that are sticking off on the sides, and that's fine. I'll just trim those off. So I'm going to get my glue and glue that down. Liquid glue really works better than the glue sticks because this is kind of a heavy paper, the watercolor paper, so it helps it to glue down better. And I'm putting it up a little higher so that I can layer my other pieces in front and overlap them. You can get a separate piece of paper to help you glue things down because see how I'm getting glue on my paper, and I don't like that. So I'm going to get a separate piece of paper for my glue paper. I don't even remember how I positioned things, so I'm just going to lay them down again as I go because it doesn't really matter. And I'm putting it up a little higher so that I can layer my other pieces in front and overlap them. Make sure you get glue out to the edges. That's why it's good to have a glue paper. That's what's so fun about this, because it's an alien landscape, it kind of just doesn't matter what you do, just however you like it. And since I've got some black showing, I'm going to get a piece and put it on top of that. It's cool. I like it. I think I'll stick something over here. And I can cut that off. So there's my landscape. Wiping my fingers off. Now, the next thing I want to do is place my planets. And so I'm going to look and see what I have and see what I like. I can do 2, I can do all of them. I can have some of the planets overlapping, like I could do some of these like that. And I could have something coming in off the edge, off the side. I might like that, like cut that off. I like that idea. This one I think looks really cool. So I might do that coming off the side. I kind of like that right there. So now before I glue them down though, I want to add some shading. So I want to make my planets look like they are three-dimensional. So let's look and see how we can do that. If we look back at what some of the other students have done, you can see how they shaded on one side and it makes it look very three-dimensional. So notice how they just shaded whatever side they chose, they always stayed on the same side. So we're going to get your black oil pastel and we're going to start shading. We will need a protective paper for this as well, so I'm going to get that right now. Okay, so I've got another piece of paper that I can use to add my shading. So I'm going to take my oil pastel and I'm going to choose a planet and start shading. I'm going to choose whatever side I'm going to choose. I'm going to do them all on the same side. So if I'm going to shade on the left, then all the planets I will shade on the left. So let's start with this guy. I'm going to take my oil pastel and I'm going to color on just like a C shape on one side. This is kind of messy, just warning you. And then I'm going to blend. Oil pastels are awesome because they blend very nicely. I want it to be gradual. I don't want there to be a line, so I'm going to just keep blending. I can add a little bit more pastel lightly and then blend that. Okay, so you can see my first planet has shading on one side. See how much more three-dimensional that looks than just a flat paper. So there's one, so I'm going to do the rest of them. And notice I color in darkly on the edge and then I get lighter as I get closer to the center, keeping it a C shape. I don't want to go straight up and down. And I blend. Isn't that cool? Love it. And I just arrange them how I want them. I don't even remember what I did. There, I think that one's going to come up off the side. And then I will glue them down. Remember to have the dark part facing the same direction. Don't turn one way, because we're showing as if the light from maybe a star or a sun is shining on the planet. So it's all coming from this direction and the shaded part, the shadow, is on the left. It's hanging off a little bit. I'm going to cut that off later. Okay. The next thing I can do is add some cracks and crevices on my landscape down here, and I want to show you how to do that. You can take the paper left over that we used for our land and we can just tear something. So I'm going to take this paper and I'm going to lay it someplace where there's a little dip in the landscape, kind of goes down a little bit. I'm going to make a crack. So I'm going to use this right here and just go along the edge. I'm holding onto this paper and I'm just put a little bit of oil pastel and then I'm going to blend it like that. And then when I take the paper away, it looks like a little crack in the rock. So I'm just going to find other places and put in some cracks in my rocks. Well, I think this looks pretty cool, and we could just cut off the planets and the landscape and be done with it. But I want to show you some extra things that we can do too. So let's trim these things off and I'll show you the extra things. So some things you can add to your alien landscape is, we talked about maybe a shooting star. So I have my white pastel chalk and I'm going to pick out something that looks like it could be a fairly bigger star. Maybe that over there, or that one I might do something else with. So I might choose something like this. It's a blob, or I can even make a dot that's a star. And then you just do a swoop line like that. Kind of makes it look like a shooting star. So I'm going to pick out this one, and maybe I'll do one more over here. A couple of shooting stars. Now another thing you can do is an exploding star, and for this you'll need a ruler and your chalk. So I'm going to use this little dot here. And I'll line up my ruler and do a line like that. And like that. One of the last things I like to do with my alien landscape is do a city under a dome. So you know we have all these scraps of paper. So find one that has a circle on it like this, and we're going to use this kind of as a template to make a domed city. So you find some place where you want your domed city. I could put it here. I think I'm going to put it right here. So it's going to look like that. It's going to go right here. So I'm going to make it, form it so that it's a shape like that and lay it on top of the ground. I'm going to take my pastel again. I'm going to hold on to my paper. And I'm just going to start doing this with my pastel. Holding on to it. And then, my finger's kind of dirty, so I need to wipe it off. I'm going to blend. And I lift it up, and it looks like a dome. So the only other thing I need to add are the shapes of the city. So I'm going to use tempera paint for that. Once again, I have a paper plate, and I'm going to add a little bit more paint. Now I'm going to take some of this paper that I cut up, and I'm just going to cut a little piece like this and fold it in half. So I need a short one, and then I need a long one. And I fold it in half. So I have a longer piece and a shorter piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip this in here and print some lines. Okay, so dab a little bit in there. And now I'm going to get my shortest one that I made that looks like this, and I'm going to make some cross lines, just like it's the buildings. All right. Another thing you can do is you can take some of your scrap papers that you used for the template, and you can actually add those to your landscape. I thought that looked really cool, so I'm going to cut that up and add that to my landscape as well. That's what's fun about these odd pieces, that you can just look at them and use them however you want to. Okay, I am finished with my landscape. I think it looks really cool. What other things do you think you could add to the landscape? What if you added some alien creatures crawling around on the ground? What if you added a spaceship up above in the sky? Use your imagination. Boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed creating an alien landscape. I would love to see your artwork. So if you'd like, you can take a picture of it and send it to mrshoopersartclass@gmail.com. And remember, every day is a great day to make art. Bye!